true friendship is hard to find. And when you find it with your boss, just because of your boss, I don't think you shouldn't have it. How can you make it work? Hello and welcome to the Thinking Cap Solutions podcast, talking everything content, audience engagement and leadership. My name's Corey Kay. With me, as always, hello to Mickey Ma.
G'day, Corey.
Very tricky dynamic to navigate, but if you get it right, I think there's some really good things at the end of it. Boss, employee, having a friendship outside of work.
Yeah, we have been asked that question many times over our careers, mate. Because there's a bunch of people that have only ever known us really as friends first and then work colleagues later. And then there's others that have known us first as the work colleagues that realise later that we've got a close friendship outside of that. So we've been asked that numerous times over the years. How do you make it work? Does it work? What's the problems there? And it keeps coming up now, even though many years down the track, the friendship's still strong. And here we are as co-founders now.
If I think about the journey that we've had as friends, I think I've been more challenged by it than you. And maybe that's because it's always been peers, or you've been my boss, and I probably haven't had it the other way around. Maybe that's got something to do with it. I'm not sure the big picture of it. I think it's done nothing but serve me and us as a team really well. And this dynamic has existed when we both ran different radio stations and were able to work together when we should have been competing against each other. And then in that dynamic of you being the boss and me being the employee, at another stage, you being the boss, me being a boss of a team. And there's been all of these different dynamics. So let's just kick it off, Mickey, with what's the value add of having a friendship between a boss and an employee?
Well, I think the first one is the depth of trust and openness that it affords you to do. And I think about our experience and not just there. There's been a handful of people that have been peers, also people that have worked for me and even former bosses and people that were bosses at the time that I've had rich friendships and continue to have rich friendships outside of the work environment. And in each of them, it's the things that have worked have been pretty the same kind of themes. The depth of trust, the ability to collaborate with knowing that you've got nothing but the best intentions, full transparency, there to support and encourage each other and guide each other is highly valuable. And it's not to say that those things can't be there if you're not friends outside of work, but it's also one that goes just another level deeper, I think, when there is a friendship beyond the workplace.
I remember the conversations we'd have, and they could be robust, nurturing. There's all these different levers that you'd pull on. And I just don't think you'd have that if you didn't have the friendship. And it's so powerful, you're right.
And you and I, many times over our years of working together, have had exactly that. We've been there to support as confidants, to having to hold each other to account. And that's been a really valuable thing, I think, for both of us at every stage that it's happened across our years. We should say here, to be very clear as well, we're not talking about people that you are workmates with and you're going to work drinks together. We are talking about those friendships that exist way outside of the work environment, that can be everything from going on holidays together that you'd want to spend time with away from work when you're not on the office clock.
Let's talk about the workplace and the good and the value that can come from having that relationship and that dynamic.
Well, you talked about the mutual respect and trust. I just think that removes a layer of complexity that sometimes can be in the work environment from employer to boss relationship, where there's that fear of being able to be open and honest. And by having that strong friendship and that trust is there, it kind of leaves the ability to be full transparent and open about everything. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't require boundaries, because it does. That removal of layer is such a powerful thing. And then what it can do for the broader team morale and culture as well. I think if there's this great dynamic between two people who happen to also be friends outside of work, now, as long as it doesn't lean one way, then people feed off that energy. And I think it festers in a good way to build greater culture and greater energy around the team. There are risks though, Corey.
Yes. Let's call it the bad. I'll raise the first point, and that is being seen as the teacher's pet. So those close relationships can start to lead to perception, and we've seen this, and that can be bias, and that obviously impacts a lot of dynamics.
For some people, perception is reality, right? So as a leader, you need to be aware of that, because that's not going to be any good for your culture if there's those kind of perceptions happening within your team. I think if you're the friend that's the employee that's got to work alongside colleagues, then all of a sudden, you might be excluded from things, or people might not feel that they can be open and honest with you around how things are feeling, or to speak around the boss. So it creates this grey and messy area there as well. And I don't think we always got it right, Corey, but I think more often than not, we we did. I know you were very mindful of that perception of, how the relationship was perceived.
I think it comes back to a team that I was working in. This is very early on in my career, where the boss and an employee had a very, very strong relationship. It wasn't something that was talked about a lot, but everybody knew. It was really obvious. And we were having conversations and what this person would do, and a good person, good employee, but they'd drop the manager's name when we were talking about, and it's natural for any team to potentially question or challenge or have these off-Broadway conversations that may be about a decision that was made. And they were, in their own subtle way, making it very clear whose back they had. In my opinion, compromise them with the rest of the team. And I never wanted to be seen, nor did I wanted to be self-aware enough to know that I wasn't going down this path of being in a team and having a boss that I was also a friend with, leaning into the friendship side when I was in a work conversation.
The risk of perception around blurred lines and those kind of things can absolutely be something that gets in the way and where it can get ugly. So if there's not those distinctions there, then you've got to be careful of that.
I think of a really good framework, Paul Roos, Sydney Swans, one of the first to lean into individual personalities, and you can have friendships with players. And he talks about, I've got 5 players that I managed and had tough conversations with, that I'm lifelong friends with. And that is what he is most proud of in his AFL career. And it was all built on respect, and no one using that relationship to manipulate the group, because then everything falls apart from there very quickly.
And I think on either side, and that can be within the relationship of the friends, so the blurring the lines of that, but also the manipulation on other people external of that relationship within the team culture as well, right? I mean, the other one, and look, not that we necessarily found this, but where another risk can come in is when it comes to having tough conversations. It can be, for some people, a lot harder to have those tough conversations when it's, but this is my friend. And that can be to the extremes of making people redundant or performance managing someone. So that's where it can get a little bit tricky, and the risk that can come involved with if you're friends with the boss.
If you can't have a line between what friendship is and being managed by someone and they're my boss, then you shouldn't be having a relationship with your boss. You actually can't. You don't have the ability to navigate that. And same for the boss as well. If they can't reprimand or have those conversations with that person, it's not working.
But I'd also like to think that even within your own personal life, with your own friendships, you want to be surrounded by people that will hold you to account and have your back and so forth, but also aren't just going to feed you BS just to blow smoke up your butt. No different to work. Ideally, you want openness and transparency, and you want that hopefully within your friendships as well. But there can be a grey area there if not handled properly.
True friendship is hard to find. And when you find it with your boss, just because of your boss, I don't think you shouldn't have it. How can you make it work?
Starts by setting very clear boundaries. And I know for you and I, Corey, that was something less of a thing, I think, when we first started out. We were basically colleagues. But when it got to a position where I was a boss of yours, we did. I remember, I don't know if it was over, I think it was over coffee, where it was like, okay, well, what's the boundaries here? And let's do what we already have done really well together, which is hold each other to account. We know what we're both capable of. We know how to get the best out of each other, but let's do it with integrity. Let's do it with respect. But let's also make sure at the end of the day, know that work's work and play's play. And I know there was times where you and I would have some really robust conversations, healthy conversations, but robust. And then 5 minutes later, knock off work and go and have a beer. To me, that was a great sign of where it worked well, because we knew what the boundaries were, but it didn't stop us from having the tough conversations because of that.
And that's how I felt at the time. So we'd get feedback around, you guys are really close, and there's this perception, and there's nothing really you can do about it. But for anyone listening who might be observing this relationship inside your own team, there's things that you don't see. And the things that people didn't see with us is the conversations that would happen. And I remember at one stage I said, dude, our friendship is starting to mean that you're just finding everything that's wrong because you can. You can't usually do this in other relationships, so it's great. It's great that you can have these constantly, this needs to be together, this. That gets really fatiguing. And that's not about friendship. That's me as an employee. And I had a team that I was managing at the same time. Whilst that became an issue, again, our friendship kicked in terms of we can have those transparent conversations. I just sat you down and told you, hey, here's what's happening, and you were able to hear me and navigate through that. But that is one of the challenges you did, right? And building those boundaries and having those conversations are super critical.
And leaning into that trust factor, and that's what I loved about it. And for you and I, there was numerous occasions, but that one you just spoke about then, and then another one where I remember you pulling me aside and saying, "Hey, look, I just don't feel yourself at your moment. You're not at your sort of peak performance. You feel sort of a bit distracted. Seems like something's going on. Is everything okay?" And I thought I had typically pretty good self-awareness and was covering things reasonably well, but clearly I wasn't. And it was because we got that close friendship that we could have that dialogue. And it was really powerful for me because it allowed me to go, I better check myself here and do better and be better. And I really valued that. So set boundaries, but still hold each other to high regards with feedback, integrity. Those kind of things are really important. Make sure you still be inclusive of the other team as well. So while people can feed off the energy the dynamic might have, don't make it all about the dynamic. How do you bring other people in for the ride as well and to be on that journey as well? And that's important too, because that's where the perception of favoritism can come in, or these people are always together. It's their way or the highway or whatever it might be. Communication, transparency, and that's not just within the dynamics of a relationship either, by the way. I think that's dynamics around the broader team. So how you're communicating with the team, how can they see that, sure, there might be a friendship here, but there is a respect around the roles that they play and that there isn't. And I know for you and I, where it was appropriate, there was times where publicly we would be able to hold each other accountable. Sometimes that was deliberate in a way to show it's not always rosy and we're not always going to agree. And while we have each other's backs where it's appropriate, it's not always going to be that way.
I want to quote Kathy Caprino, and she's written this amazing article. I highly recommend it. You put her name into LinkedIn and you'll find this article. And I think she nails it in terms of how you can make a personal relationship work outside of your working hours. And that's firstly, emotionally mature. You're transparent and honest, capable of effectively managing their feelings and emotions when the things get tough and rough, well-boundaried and can say no to what doesn't feel right or feel good. Be aware of the power dynamics and be strong enough and brave enough to openly address them. And finally, not willing to use or manipulate other people as pawns for their benefit.
It absolutely nails it. And I think about our dynamic in there, I think, we've always tried to thrive and live up to all those 6 points she talks about. Didn't always get it right, but I think that's the thing here is that, being friends with the boss is not always easy, but sometimes it's the realities of how life might plays out. I mean, we didn't deliberately plan it to be that way, but it was. And there's numerous other people that I've had very rich friendships outside of the work, but also worked with, some as peers, some as bosses, some as employees, and each of them requires their own maintenance and ways to manage it, but it can be done.
I think it's just another dynamic that requires the same amount of thought and work as any other relationship that you have.
All relationships need maintenance, personal, professional. This is no different. It just adds a different layer of opportunity, complexity, and all that. But as we've proven, as we've talked about with Paul Roos and numerous others, there's a bunch of research out there to look at what the benefits are, and there are plenty. It is achievable. But it can be tricky. And if you find yourself in a situation and you want to know how to navigate through it, please reach out to us, thinkingcapsolutions.com.au, or you can get to us on LinkedIn, Thinking Cap Solutions, all one word.